This is your company, your funds, that you are treating all the clients the same when they clearly signed up to different terms of service.
So I just want to respond to that. And please, I completely respect your question, but you have monopolized all of these discussions, Coffeezilla. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here. I completely understand.
Grandstand? No, this is called holding your feet to the fire. There's a big difference. Grandstanding would be, he's like, ha, I hath caught you in my trap, doth see. You are the liar. Like, that would be grandstanding. This is like, okay, but just, can we please focus? I need a very specific answer to this question because you're so good at avoiding it.
Sam Bankman-Fried into a third interview with me, and this time he may have admitted to fraud. You'll be the judge. You can click to this timestamp if you just want to listen to the interview, but I want to explain the background, the strategy that went into this call to try to learn where others had failed, including, by the way, learning from my own failures interviewing Sam. Now, first, I want to give some background. Sam at no point has wanted to talk to me. Every time I've kind of snuck on these Q&A.
Yeah, why would you do this? Like, I made a meme out of Coffeezilla that was like, you know, the one DM that every crypto bro fears, and it's just Coffeezilla dropping into your DMs being, hey, can I ask you some questions? Because that alone would be like, oh shit. But then there's some people who are so deluded, I guess they've just been fucking failing upward because of cryptocurrency for so long that they think they can like outsmart him. And it's always just like they get on there, he asks them a handful of questions, they start by complimenting him, and then they're like, well, I don't see why you're really stressing in this one. He's like, oh, I just want that answer. You have to give me an answer based on blah, blah, blah. And then they get furious by the end of it.
And started peppering him with questions. He usually leaves. But I realized that since this was my third time basically doing the exact same trick, it was probably going to be one of my last, because at some point he was going to catch on. So I knew going into this, it might be my last chance to interview Sam. And because of that, I had to think long and hard about what the perfect line of questioning would be to really pin Sam down, knowing that he's a master at dodging questions. He's done it with everybody so far, including me, by the way. And I mean, look, I think we've got some great stuff, but to this point, I didn't think anyone had gotten that smoking gun. He always denies everything. He always has a sort of a loophole out of it. So I'd have to try a different tactic. And here was my plan. Sam's whole excuse about not being a con man all hinges around Alameda research. Basically, he says he knew nothing of what was going on there because he was just the CEO of FTX. And while that's nearly impossible to believe that he's this stupid or incompetent, it's really hard to prove 100%. So I realized if we were going to do this, I'd have to remove Alameda from my case, right? I needed to show that Sam had knowingly defrauded people without invoking Alameda at any point. And here was my plan to do it. I was going to spend the entire time laser focused on the FTX terms of service. Now, some of you may know FTX
like the Last of Us soundtrack.
They cannot use customer funds for anything. They can't trade with them. They can't loan them out. And I thought this was a really important point because obviously that money is no longer there. So clearly something must have happened. But I'm far from the first person to notice this. Many people, including myself, have already tried to ask him about this and pin him down. But for various reasons, well, it didn't work. And I needed to learn why so we could avoid it. So I want to go through a few major interviews with Sam and show why this line of questioning has always fallen apart, starting with the New York Times.
The terms of service for FTX, and I just want to read you this. It says, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall or may be loaned to FTX Trading. FTX Trading does not represent or treat digital assets in users' accounts as belonging to FTX Trading. So how is it possible that Alameda had this loan of such a large size?
So there's that piece from the terms of service, but there were a number of other parts of the terms of service and a number of other parts of the platform on top of that. There is the borrow lending facility, where users were lending billions of dollars of assets to each other, collateralized by assets on the exchange. You had obviously futures contracts where there are leveraged positions on. Now, of course, all of this, it's meant to be the case that these are positions where FTX could, if it needed to, margin call those positions and close them down in time such that it would cover all of those, all those shorts, all those liabilities. Obviously, that wasn't the case here, and that's a massive failure of oversight, of risk management, and of diffusion of responsibility from myself running FTX.
But just make this very straight. Was there commingling of funds? That's what it appears like. It appears like there's been a genuine commingling of funds that are FTX customers.
Yeah, he would not have done well during a congressional fucking questioning. I don't know if you just saw that. He turned down the subpoena to testify before Congress.
That were not supposed to be commingled with your separate firm.
I didn't knowingly commingle funds.
Okay. Sorkin tried and failed here to pin him down on the terms of service. Why? Well, because Sam escapes in this talk about a different part of the terms of service, which related to margin trading, where you take out some kind of a loan. And
Rob Brown would destroy him, yeah.
Deflection. Like, it doesn't matter that there's a separate margin trading terms of service because the people who weren't margin trading still should have had their funds kept safe. But it sort of threw Sorkin off track. And so now we're going to move to the Stephanopoulos interview, which was a bit better because Sam's going to try the margin trading story, but watch Stephanopoulos. He does a better job at honing in on the question.
But as you know, the FTX terms of service tell the people who signed up, none of the digital assets in your account are the property of or shall be or may be loaned to FTX trading. But you're saying that happened.
My understanding is a few things happen. The first is there is a margin trading facility on FTX by which users can lend out funds, by which other users borrow funds. And so there are explicit
there's
cases
the sleight of
where
hand
there
again,
is
right there.
margin
Now he's talking
where
about the
there is
separate
borrow
part.
lending.
If Alameda is borrowing the money that belongs to FTX depositors, that's a bright red line, isn't it?
There are a lot of cases where that's actually explicitly part of the programs and that are
But
happening.
not
and
here.
people are
Here it
opting.
says that the digital assets may not be loaned to FTX trading. They can't be loaned out.
There existed a borrow lending facility on FTX. And I think that's probably covered. I don't remember exactly where, but
Did you have to reset your dialogue tree? What just happened there?
somewhere else in the terms of service.
But they'd have to approve of that. They're saying they didn't approve of it here. They're saying you approved of it.
Now, this is great stuff from Stephanopoulos. He refocused the question, but Sam's about to weasel out with a new trick. Go ahead and watch.
If you rewind to the beginning of FTX, where some customers were I think in line with sort of existing relationships that they've had, at least in some cases, wiring money straight to Alameda Research in order to
Oh, no way. You blame it on the customers now. You're saying it was the customers that did it. You're saying that they took the money and then put it into Alameda. Ooh, you snake. Oh, that's crafty.
trade on FTX.
So you do know, and you did know, that FTX deposits were being funneled to Alameda.
So I was vaguely aware that that was how some wires were being sent in the first place.
Didn't that set off alarm bells in your head?
So there were a lot of people who were involved in that process. And look, I really deeply wish that I had taken a lot more responsibility for understanding what the details were of what was going on there.
This is how he slips out again. He tried the margin trading explanation. It didn't work. So he pivots to, okay, well, there's this weird backstory where FTX used to take wires from Alameda. And maybe that's where we lost the money, right? It's another smokescreen. But unfortunately, it kind of hamstrung the conversation. And if I was going to succeed, I'd have to beat that explanation. And in the first couple interviews I did with Sam, I tried to go with this insider angle where insiders I had talked to had told me something very different. But it didn't work. Go ahead and watch.
There's sort of all this talk about the terms of service. Did you break terms of service? Did you not? You're basically claiming that there was a separate side of your terms of service.
We've already seen this.
But I talked to somebody from Alameda and asked how big the position of or how many people had assets in the type of accounts that terms of service would apply to versus the regular terms of service, which said you couldn't use their money. And they said it was about $1 billion that was in the margin trading or the margin side of things where you could reuse their funds or whatever, and the rest of it was not there.
Also, when we were watching these, in both of them, he ends up just pulling so I have to go now. My home planet needs me. Dun, 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 kind of moment. I don't know why you would have agreed to a third encounter with Coffeezilla. After the first two, where you're I'm so uncomfortable with this, I'm just gonna bow right out of the call. What did you think the third one was gonna do?
It seems like you're putting all your eggs behind this one excuse about, there was this separate side of the terms of service. How do you address everyone else?
So I don't have all the data in front of me. My memory is that it was substantially more than $1 billion. I can't verify that. On top of that, there were other effects as well. Some of those were early wire transfers sent directly to Alameda.
Yeah, I kind of got stuck where Stephanopoulos roughly got stuck. I should have known that he was just going to refuse the evidence of insiders and just say, well, I disagree, and go back to his Alameda wire explanation. And I tried following it up a bit, but it didn't really matter. I had kind of missed my shot on that particular angle. And as I reflected on this, I realized all of the talk about margin trading, future trading, wire transfers to Alameda, all of it is a smokescreen from the big problem. The big problem is that some percentage of FTX's customer base never sent a wire to Alameda. They never signed up to margin trading. They never did spot margin. All they did was put their assets on the platform, and they were told that their assets would not be borrowed, it would not be loaned out, and that money would always be there.
That's very cut and dry.
Why wasn't it there? There's no other way to explain that. If the money's not there, then fraud. And I had to laser in on that one point, not get distracted by these shiny objects that Sam's throwing up about this or that, or what about this, what about that? No, there's only one question that matters, and it's impossible for him to answer, I thought. So that was my strategy going into it. That was the backstory and how I learned from previous interviews. So without further ado, here's my third and probably final call with Sam Bankman-Fried.
If you're trying to do things with good intentions.
I'm about to go up.
Okay, Coffee, you're up.
Hey, Sam, it's me again. I just wanted to ask real quick about the terms of service question, which Rex brought up a little bit. I want to expound on it. Can you just tell us, yes or no, were you treating client assets just on the regular digital asset side different from the margin trading side?
I do think we were treating them differently. There were a bunch of different sides, or more than two sides there, but I do think that we were cognizant of the fact that like there were differences between uses for like margin versus staking versus spot versus futures collateral versus other things.
Yeah, just people. I'm just talking about people just putting Bitcoin on the exchange. Yeah. Obviously, there was really clear terms of service around that. If it's true that you didn't invest client assets, not even in treasuries, as you said via a now deleted tweet, why do those client assets no longer exist?
So I'm trying to trace through some of this. Here's my best guess, and I wish I could give you a more confident answer, but I don't have the data. But my best guess is basically it's a combination of the following. One piece is the transfer sent directly to Alameda Research from customers. One piece, and that I think is a fairly substantial piece.
He say it. He say it.
One piece is.
Wait, can you explain what that piece means? So people were sending money to Alameda instead of they were getting credited on FTX, and Alameda just ended up using those funds, and they were never held separately per the terms of service.
Well, there was a separate legal agreement with that. I don't know the details of it. I don't have it in front of me, but there's a separate legal agreement with respect to transfers that were sent directly to Alameda Research by users, especially before FTX had its own bank accounts. And so I do think that is part of what happened there, likely.
Let's focus on only client assets that happened after FTX got a bank. Y'all said digital assets are treated a very specific way. Why were those digital assets not treated that way?
So of the remaining piece, and there's a few other pieces as well around futures and other things. I understand that's not what you're talking about. For the ones that you are talking about, right? For the ones that were left, and I'm just taking a stab at this because I don't have the data, but my best guess is the following: is that there were a lot of those assets remaining. We processed something like $5 or $6 billion, I think, of withdrawals over the few days prior to, or I guess the few days during the crash, and there are still a few $1 billion of those remaining, I think, in the estate. And so you put those together, you have many billions of dollars of those assets. But I think, and so that's part of the answer, is that there were a large number of actual assets there. I think there's one follow-up question you probably still have there, which is, well, how about people who didn't withdraw and were also in that bucket?
Yeah.
And part of the answer is, well, there still do exist some number of billions of dollars of assets, of hard assets in the estate.
No, is there one-to-one assets? Because that's the whole thing. We're talking about a separation of funds. So those funds should be in a different place, in a different wallet than everybody else. What you talked about servicing billions of dollars of withdrawals has nothing to do with those specific digital assets, because that's just first come, first serve, whoever pulled out first. We're talking about people who never agreed to have their funds loaned out, who never agreed to have their funds put on margin. They should have, according to your terms of service, one-to-one backing. It should all still be in some bucket somewhere. And are you confident today, as the CEO of FTX, this has nothing to do with Alameda, are you confident today to say that those are absolutely real and they exist and they're present, people are backed one-to-one on client digital assets?
So I think, and again, I'm just taking a stab here, but I think what happened is that if you look at especially a lot of the withdrawals that happened, those withdrawals were not necessarily only coming from people who never used margin trading or futures or staking or anything else. Those weren't just withdrawals from people who were keeping one-to-one backed, or were sort of just keeping them as pure spot.
So
balances.
the answer is no. You don't have the money.
And it was omnibus wallets, between the various categories. And so I think that the answer to your question is that a number of those assets were withdrawn by people who had balances on the exchange, potentially in the few days prior to the collapse. And if you wanted to think about it this way, it could be that that happened. And then, when the collapse sort of completed, that effectively meant that there was, if you wanted to put it this way.
What's so wild about just like listening to him squirm? His strategy just right out of the gates, and I don't know if it was one that was advised to him. Maybe it was. I have no idea. He's probably got multiple lawyers, but did someone tell him just go for the illusion of total transparency, as in like you're going to answer anyone's questions. You've got nothing to hide. You want to get in front of this because that's been the strategy. But like you clearly do have a lot to hide. It's quite obvious.
Right, fungibility created during those withdrawals between assets for people who had and had not been using.
But that means that there is no separation of funds. If there's fungibility between two different buckets of there are no buckets. It's just one bucket. Everyone's taking out of the bucket, which means substantially anyone who had your terms of service with digital assets wasn't actually subject to that terms of service. They were subject to the same terms of service of your margin trading, right? Which is your more risky product. So you subjected everyone to the higher risk product because fundamentally, when it came down to it,
his
you're
lawyers
saying
are
there's
bankrupting his
fungibility. It's a dollar
parents.
here, a
What?
dollar there. Everyone can take out a
All
dollar
his
as fast as
lawyers
they
are?
want.
That's wild.
Don't you see that as like defrauding your customers, the people who trusted you to just say, hey, this is not going to go anywhere except for we're not investing your assets. If I can exchange one-to-one and I'm the one who put risky stuff on with risky assets with risky terms of service, I can take the money that someone who didn't sign up to those same risky terms didn't agree to. Isn't that fraud?
So I'm specifically talking about what happened in the days immediately during and following the crash, in that 3 or so day period. And during that period, I think we may have allowed, just generalized withdrawals. I think that was, if you're saying that we should have held up withdrawals for everyone who had an open futures position, for clawback potential or something like that. I don't know.
No, for maintaining the one-to-one ratio that you promised. You said that they would have their guarantees.
That we wanted to treat customers equally. It was an incredible.
But they had agreed to different things, so you can't treat.
Yeah, they weren't equal. What are you talking about? This only works if you gave people, certain individuals with privilege, the power to withdraw all of the funds, regardless of other people's secure funds, which should have the one-to-one backing. Didn't do it. If they didn't do anything, because they're like, oh, it doesn't matter for me. I've got my secure backing. I mean, there's going to be at least a couple $1 billion worth of, real investor cash to tokens staying in there. So this isn't going to be something where everything gets pulled out.
Equally. I mean, it's like, this is the whole problem of the story of FTX and Alameda, is all the funds were being commingled. Isn't this just another story of commingling funds, except this is now fraud. FTX, which you can't pass the blame to Alameda anymore. This is your company, your funds, that you are treating all the clients the same when they clearly signed up to different terms of service.
So I just want to respond to that. And please, I completely respect your question, but you have monopolized all of these discussions, Coffeezilla. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here. I completely understand.
Grandstand? No, this is called holding your feet to the fire. There's a big difference. Grandstanding would be, he's like, ha, I hath caught you in my trap, doth see. You are the liar. Like, that would be grandstanding. This is like, okay, but just, can we please focus? I need a very specific answer to this question because you're so good at avoiding it.
Where you're coming from. But to answer your question, I didn't make a decision there. We processed withdrawals as we normally do, until it became clear we couldn't anymore, at which point we shut them off. And it was the case that, like, at that point, there was a big liquidity hole. That's what happened. If you want to judge that process and think that, like, we should have been spending those days frantically trying to code up a new withdrawal process, I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from.
It's not what he's been saying. He's just trying to get you to explain where it went. It's just very simple. Where'd the money go? Because apparently, according to one of the 2 different terms of service, there were individuals who would have a backing, a guarantee, if you will, that their money was secured, that it wouldn't be able to be moved into, the fungible amounts.
Yeah, sure. I think that's fine. I mean, it's not about coding up a new withdrawal process. It's about treating your client assets the way you told them they'd be treated.
Yes.
Right? It's a very different
easy
thing.
Yeah.
Completely. But anyways, I'll stop grandstanding for Sam. Thanks, guys.
Oh, that's a good mic drop.
Oh my gosh. Woo! Oh my gosh. Wow. We got the call out. We got the shout out. All right. You can probably tell I was pretty excited about that because I finally got what I was looking for. A straight answer on the problem of funds, right? Sam explicitly says that FTX was not separating funds. They were allowing generalized withdrawals. The dollars were fungible from different buckets. You can't do that. We finally dodged all the BS about margin trading, about Alameda wires. We finally got to the heart of it, which is that there are no funds left over for the people who just should have had their funds separated because they never separated them from the beginning. They were always seemingly commingled. And although Sam wouldn't necessarily agree that they were always FTX was billions of dollars that they did not have because of how they allowed themselves. To give you kind of a regular finance analysis about why this is so cataclysmically bad, in my opinion, fraud. Imagine you bank at JP Morgan, right? You have your money in the savings account part. Well, then you find out that they actually had this risky hedge fund. And you know what? They actually kind of blew up. In fact, they blew up so badly that JP Morgan Chase, it's all shutting down. But when you go to the bank to...
Is the audio supposed to be with that blown out? Yes. It's the Zoomer humor. The Zoomers are really big into massively distorted, loud audio out of nowhere as kind of a jump scare almost, and adds to the silliness of what you're watching on the internet.
Draw your money. You find out that instead of keeping your money safely in your savings account, they had allowed the people in the hedge fund business to just withdraw it. You know, first come, first serve, right? They treated all clients the same, according to them. Well, you say, well, no, that's fraud because you signed up to very different terms of service.
My son does that. I don't.
He was going to be like, you know, in this hedge fund, right?
It's what the Zoomers are into. Can I tell you?
And if you just throw all the money in one pot, the terms of service are meaningless, right? You're
True.
exposed to the same level of risk as the guy who took on huge risk. And that's fundamentally what happened at FTX. That's fraud. They told people their money was safe, and ultimately, they just subjected everyone to the same risk as like the day trading degenerate gambler on 100x leverage. And I really found the last thing Sam told me like so telling.
To answer your question, I didn't make a decision there. We processed withdrawals as we normally do. That's what happened. If you want to judge that process and think that like we should have been spending those days frantically trying to code up a new withdrawal process, I disagree with you, but I understand where you're coming from.
This is so interesting because no, of course I don't think you should be coding up a new withdrawal process while you're going bankrupt. But if throwing all your client funds in a pool and letting the first come first serve get the money, that's the wrong process to begin with. Your process was fraudulent from the start. It should have never been your process. Your process should have been what you promised clients, which is of course what I told Sam. And although I think Sam's probably guilty of a lot more than we covered here, I really wanted to get to this minimum viable fraud case, and I think we did get it. I mean, there is no sort
Larry
of wiggling
David
around the
FTX
fact
commercial? I haven't
that
even seen that.
He was the CEO of FTX, and all of this stuff that was bad that we proved happened at FTX. You don't have to invoke Alameda to get to this, so you can't say he didn't know because he definitely did know, and he says he knew. So the last thing I'm going to close on, and I thought it was the funniest part, was his little outburst at the end about me monopolizing his time.
So I just want to respond to that, and please, I completely respect your question, but you have monopolized all of these discussions, Coffeezilla. You need to let others speak, and you need to respond to what I'm saying and not grandstand as much here.
And I thought it was notable for two reasons. One, he hasn't lost his cool once in any interview. This is the first time I heard him like really crack. And I thought that was interesting, but I also thought it was interesting because it's just not true. It's totally wrong. I've talked to Sam for I think 30 minutes across 3 interviews total, like in total. And for context, he gave the New York Times an hour. He gave George Stephanopoulos 2 hours. I think out of everyone he's talked to, or at least of the major interviews, I've talked to him the least. So if anything, I'm efficient with my time. That's all I'm going to say. And speaking of being efficient with my time, this video is over. Lock this man up, and I'll see you later.
Wow, well done. Coffeezilla is doing more reporting and more investigative reporting for FTX than anyone else.
I call it the wheel.
I don't think so. What does it do?
It rolls.
Yeah, so does a bagel, okay? A bagel you can eat. One of the worst ideas I've ever heard.
Oh, this is really hard. This is sad.
Brother David, behold, the fork.
I got 10 forks right here, baby! Am I right?
I mean, normally I'd be like, I'll laugh at that because, you know, Larry David's funny. His show's funny. And the fact that this is all in servitude of FTX? The fuck?
My lord?
What is it?
A toilet, my lord. A toilet? You expect this court to do its business inside? We're not animals. We go outside like humans.
It's coffee. It's new.
Oh, it's awful.
You don't like it?
I'm all jittery and feel like I got a big job coming on.
Hancock, you sign first.
No king! Gentlemen, have you taken leave of your senses? The people shall have the right to vote. Even the stupid ones? Yes. Stupid people vote? Yes. Edison, can I be honest with you? It stinks. Does your wife know what's going on here?
So cringe.
Work. You're wasting your time, and it's sad. You might as well put the dishes in the shower.
Hey, Catherine, what's cooking? We're putting a man on the moon.
Are you out of your mind? I can't even get tuna without celery. Nobody's gone to the moon, ever.
Why not?
It's too far. It's far. It's really far. It's far.
我々の未来はポータブルミュージックです。
バカかバカかわかるだろうわかるだろうわかるだろう出て行けみんな言うのか怖いんだバッタリがいつも言うぞバッタリどこバッタリ
Like I was saying, it's FTX. It's a
Oh
safe,
my God.
easy way to get into crypto.
Oh my god! Oh my god! That's where it was all leading to! Fucking all the annals of human history to this moment. No! Oh, it hurts. This hurts so bad.
It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
But it's not! It's really not! You'll lose all your money! All of it! You can just burn your money before your eyes, at least you'll get some warmth.
I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
He was right. He was right. Damn. No. Larry, ironically, could have saved you. Could have saved you a couple dollars there. Or tokens.
Franklin! Hey, I left my cane in there. What? What do you mean? Hey, that's an expensive cane!
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demmel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojack, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.